Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're somewhere comfortable today. Maybe dim the lights a bit and settle into your favorite chair.
Mm.
Because where we are going today, well, it isn't just a different time. It honestly feels like a completely different genre of reality.
It really does.
Yeah.
Usually when we dig into these archives, we're looking at pure philosophy or metaphysics. But today feels like we walked straight onto the set of a vintage noir detective movie.
Yeah, it's got that vibe.
Right? It has the smoke-filled rooms and secret political bosses. But then there's mysterious ailments and a twist ending that belongs right in the Twilight Zone.
It is a wild ride. So we are looking specifically at session 315 from the early sessions, book 7 of the Seth material. The date of record on this one is January 30th, 1967.
A great era.
Oh, absolutely. But before we strike the match and really light the scene here, I want to make sure we state clearly for everyone listening that this deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Yes. We're just here to explore the material, unpack it, and see what we can learn about the human condition without any paywalls.
Exactly. And for anyone who might be new to the cast of characters we're dealing with today, let's quickly set the stage. We have Seth, who is the personality being channeled through Jane Roberts, and Seth refers to Jane as Ruburt.
Right. And we also have Robert Butts, Jane's husband, who is acting as the scribe. Seth calls him Joseph. And in this particular session, we actually have a guest in the room, a witness.
John Bradley.
Right.
Yeah.
Seth refers to him as Philip. And John isn't just a passive observer sitting in the corner here. He is the client. He is the main subject of the night. And honestly, he gets way more than he bargained for.
He really does. You know, usually when people think of channeled material, they expect, I don't know, flowery language about the cosmos. Stuff like, we are all stardust.
Yeah. Vague spiritual platitudes.
Exactly. But what I absolutely love about Session 315 is how incredibly gritty and mundane it starts out. We aren't talking about the structure of the universe yet. We are talking about local county politics in Pennsylvania.
It totally grounds the experience. It shows you that spiritual insight isn't separated from daily life.
Yeah.
It's right there in your job offers, in your diet, and your shoes.
And your shoes. We are definitely going to get to the shoes. But let's start with the hook. The mystery. It's January 1967. John Bradley has come to this session in Elmira, New York, and he is sitting on a secret.
A pretty big one.
Yeah, he hasn't told Jane or Rob the full details yet, but he has been approached to run for political office.
Specifically, he was asked to run for county commissioner in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is a respectable gig. It's a solid career move.
Right. And usually the person visiting would ask something like, Seth, should I take the job? Is this my destiny? But Seth doesn't even wait for the question. He just jumps right in like a forensic investigator.
He immediately starts dismantling the entire scenario. He tells John that the guy who asked him to run, a man named Clint Smith, who was the assistant district attorney, isn't the real architect of this plan.
Clint Smith is just the delivery system.
Exactly. This is where it gets chilling. Seth starts describing a white-haired man operating in the shadows. He says the man who offered the suggestion to Philip may not realize himself that the original idea was not his own.
Think about the implication of that for a second. We tend to think our ideas are completely our own. We think, hey, I should ask John to run for office. But Seth is tracing the genealogy of that thought.
He sees this telepathic chain of command. The idea started with a power broker and trickled down into Clint Smith's mind. And Smith acted on it without even knowing the source.
And Seth doesn't just say, oh, there's a mystery man. He gives a literal police sketch description. He says this man is between 47 and 67 years old. His face isn't old, but his hair is white. And then he drops this incredibly specific cultural reference.
The Senator Dirksen comparison.
Yes. He says the man reminds Ruburt of Senator Dirksen.
Everett Dirksen. For the younger listeners, you might have to look him up. He was the Senate minority leader at the time. He had this wild, wavy white hair and a very distinctive, jowly, craggy face. He was almost a caricature of a politician.
Now, we want to be clear here as we unpack this historical political context that we aren't taking any political sides today, left or right. We are just impartially reporting on the content provided in the source material to convey the ideas Seth was presenting.
Absolutely. Seth is just using Dirksen as a visual aid. He says, imagine Dirksen, but then he refines the image. He says, this man is fuller in the face, however, and less eloquent, and he gives him an initial.
So put yourself in John Bradley's shoes. You're sitting there in the semi-darkness. You know Clint Smith asked you to run. You don't know about NEM. But then you start thinking. And later in the session notes, we get the verification.
The aha moment.
Exactly. John realizes that the M refers to Murphy, the senior partner in Clint Smith's law firm.
And does Murphy fit the description?
Perfectly. John confirms that Murphy is closer to that 47-year age mark. He has whitish hair, and here's the kicker. He is fuller in the face than Senator Dirksen, but has that same general politician vibe.
What blows my mind is that John states he had only met Murphy once briefly. He barely knew the guy existed. He certainly didn't know Murphy was pulling the strings on his political career.
That's the noir element right there. You have the innocent protagonist John being moved around on a chessboard by a figure he can't even see. Seth exposes the whole game. He warns John of pressure that will be applied. He predicts a meeting where several or 7 people will want him in that capacity.
And he gives very practical financial advice. He warns about an unwise initial expenditure.
Which John confirms later. Running for this office would have cost him a lot of money out of pocket. It wasn't a paying gig that would replace his salary, it was a financial drain. Seth is essentially performing a risk assessment from the other side.
He's looking at the probabilities. He mentions a connection to a store or shopkeeper who puts up money, which implies campaign financing or backroom deals. He mentions a brother-in-law involved. He is weaving this web of connections that John himself isn't even fully aware of yet.
And I love the tone here. Seth is deadly serious about the warning, but he can't help himself with the humor. At one point, he jokingly says, "If you ran for office, you could count on my vote."
Which is great. I mean, Seth is a non-physical energy personality essence. I don't think he's registered to vote in Lycoming County.
Exactly. Voter fraud via channeling. But it shows that Seth has a real personality. He's engaging with them as friends. But the takeaway for John is crystal clear. This political opportunity, it's a trap. It's a drain on resources, and there are people pulling strings behind the scenes that John needs to be aware of.
And this sets the stage perfectly for the rest of the session. We've established that Seth can see things John can't. He can see the hidden motives of strangers. Now the session pivots. We go from the external world of politics to the internal world of the body.
Right, because Jane Ruburt has been having some physical symptoms. And John has some stuff going on too. And Seth launches into this fascinating theory about the left side versus the right side of the body.
This is a core concept in the Seth material regarding health. It's not just biology, it's symbology. Seth says symptoms in this case with the right hand or on the right side of the body represent difficulties in the conscious realms.
Okay, let's unpack that. Right side equals conscious. That means work, logical thinking, the stuff we deal with day to day.
Exactly. It's the active side. For most people, the right hand is the sword hand. It's the hand you use to manipulate the world to write, to shake hands. It represents your interface with the exterior environment. So if your right hand hurts or your right side is acting up, Seth is asking, what are you grappling with in your conscious life? What task are you resisting? What action are you afraid to take?
It's a literal feedback loop. The body is acting out the hesitation of the mind. And then we have the flip side, the left side.
Right. Seth says symptoms of the left hand or left portions of the body represent difficulties from subconscious levels.
The subconscious, the hidden stuff, the shield arm.
And he adds a specific emotional tag to it. He says feelings of guilt in this case involved with the left hand.
Guilt. That is heavy. So the body becomes a map. If you have a pain on the left, you shouldn't just look for a physical cause. You should look for what you're feeling guilty about or what subconscious pattern is bubbling up.
It connects back to the idea that the body is a feedback mechanism.
Yeah.
It's trying to tell you something. Seth says both sides represent failures between the conscious and subconscious portions of the self. Basically, the communication lines are down, the mind and the inner self aren't talking, so the body has to scream to get attention.
So we have the diagnosis. Right side is conscious struggles. Left side is subconscious guilt. What is the prescription? Because this is where I think Seth sounds less like a mystic and more like a holistic nutritionist who maybe had a little too much wine.
It is surprisingly specific. For John, he suggests decreasing salt, which honestly is just good medical advice for a man in his 40s or 50s.
Solid advice. But then
Then he says add eggplant to the diet.
the eggplant. Why eggplant? Is there a magical property to the aubergine?
He doesn't elaborate on the molecular reason, but he is very specific. Add eggplant and continue with the yoga exercises. And then he adds color therapy. He tells John to wear green more often. The vibrations from the color in his case at this time are therapeutic.
I just love the image of John Bradley, this businessman who is being courted by the Republican Party doing yoga in a green suit while eating an eggplant parmesan.
It sounds funny, but Seth is very serious about the vibrational quality of things. Food has a vibration. Color has a vibration. And at that moment, John's system needed the green vibration and whatever properties the eggplant offered to balance him out. It highlights that health isn't one size fits all. It's a dynamic balancing act of frequencies.
Speaking of dynamic balancing acts, we have to talk about the sneakers.
The sneakers. This is one of those tiny details that just rings so true. It's the aha moment of the deep dive for me. The small thing that explains the big thing.
So Jane is having trouble wearing her sneakers. They hurt or they're uncomfortable. And logically, you'd think, okay, the shoes are too tight or she has a bunion.
Right. Mechanical problem requires a mechanical solution. Get a shoe stretcher.
But Seth says the difficulty in wearing his sneakers is not physical.
They remind him of a pair of his mother's shoes.
That stops me in my tracks every time. It's not the shoe, it's the memory attached to the shoe.
This is pure psychology, but taken to a physical extreme. Jane has a complicated relationship with her mother, very traumatic in many ways. These sneakers, by association, trigger those memories. Maybe they look like shoes her mother wore when she was angry or when she was sick. And that emotional association manifests as physical discomfort. The foot rejects the shoe because the mind rejects the memory.
It makes you look at your own closet differently. Like, does that shirt give me a headache because the collar is tight or because I wore it to a funeral? Does that chair hurt my back because it's bad ergonomics or because I sat in it when I got fired?
Precisely. Seth is teaching them, and us, to look at the symbolic associations we attach to objects. Physical reality is drenched in emotional meaning. We don't just live in a world of atoms, we live in a world of symbols. If you ignore the symbol, you can't fix the pain.
So we've covered the political intrigue with the white-haired man. We've covered the color therapy and the symbolic sneakers. Now we move into what I call the domestic prophecies. Seth starts looking at John's personal life, specifically his wife, Mary Ellen.
And again, the specificity is startling. Seth predicts an event concerning Mary Ellen and the 5 women on a Thursday afternoon.
He says there seem to be 5 women with whom your wife will be involved on a Thursday afternoon, and he connects it to a store or shopkeeper.
Now, at the time of the session, John knows exactly what this is. He confirms that Mary Ellen is selling Sarah Coventry jewelry.
Sarah Coventry. That is such a blast from the past.
It is. It was huge in the 60s. Direct sales like Tupperware, but for costume jewelry. You'd have parties in your living room.
And John confirms she has a party scheduled for Thursday.
And the dynamic of the party matches Seth's description perfectly. You have the hostess, you have guests. The count of 5 women fits the core group involved in setting this up.
Seth even gives a timeline for how long this business venture will last. He says 4 months, or 4 years. He leans towards the months. He says it will be beneficial while it lasts, but not of long duration.
Which is a very gentle way of saying don't quit your day job for the jewelry business.
Yeah.
It's a temporary thing. But again, why does Seth mention this? It seems so trivial. Why does a multidimensional entity care about costume jewelry?
I think it's verification. It's calibration. It's Seth saying, I see you. I see your life. I see the Thursday afternoon jewelry party. It builds trust. If he can see the jewelry party, maybe he's right about the white-haired man in politics.
Exactly. It establishes his bona fides. And he needs that trust because the next warning he gives John is a bit more sensitive. It's about another woman.
June Fleming.
Seth doesn't name her initially. He just says John will meet a woman in this town, a woman he has met before, and he warns he should not encourage any relationship.
That is the don't go there warning, the red flashing light.
John immediately identifies her. He says, oh, that's June Fleming. He met her at a bar called the Elms. And get this, John mentions in the notes that he had actually heard Seth's voice in warning when he was with her in the past.
Whoa. So John is out at a bar, maybe things are getting a little flirtatious, and he literally hears Seth in his head saying, nope, bad idea.
It implies that Seth acts as a sort of guardian angel or a conscience for John. He's looking out for John's marriage and his well-being. He says later connection with a woman approximately 56 to enter in there. It's a messy situation that Seth is advising him to steer clear of.
It's interesting that Seth, who operates from this vast perspective, still cares about the fidelity of John's marriage.
I think Seth cares about unnecessary complications. He sees the probable futures. He sees that an affair with June Fleming leads to chaos, unhappiness, maybe divorce, maybe financial ruin. He's guiding John towards the path of least resistance, or at least the path of least unnecessary suffering.
Unnecessary suffering, that's a good way to put it. Okay. We have arrived. We have cleared the appetizers. We discussed the eggplant. We discussed the Sarah Coventry jewelry. We discussed the sneakers. Now we have to talk about the main course. The reason we are doing this deep dive, the shape-shifting boss.
This is the part of the session that really challenges our understanding of reality.
Yeah.
It takes everything we think we know about biology and physics and just throws it out the window.
So John asks Seth about a strange event that happened 3 weeks prior in Rochester, New York. John was at a business meeting, his boss was giving a speech, And as John watched, his boss's face literally changed.
John says, I'd say he appeared to be about 15 years younger.
Just picture that. You're sitting in a conference room, fluorescent lights humming, someone is droning on about sales figures, and suddenly the man at the podium de-ages. His wrinkles smooth out, his jaw tightens, his posture lifts. He looks like a younger version of himself.
And John isn't asking, did I imagine this? He's asking, can you throw some light on this? He knows what he saw. He trusts his senses, but his rational mind is reeling.
And Seth confirms it. He says the transformation brought about subconsciously in answer to an inner need and to offset a growing feeling of panic and failure.
Let's analyze that quote because it is profound.
Yeah.
To offset a growing feeling of panic and failure.
We need the context here. What was happening to the boss? Why was he panicking?
According to John's notes, the boss was in trouble. He wasn't doing well in the company. At this specific meeting, the regional manager, a guy named Stan Farrer, had basically hijacked the meeting. He took over the spotlight. The boss was being sidelined. He was desperate. He felt his power slipping away. He felt old and obsolete.
So internally, he is screaming. He is panicking.
And his subconscious mind reacts. It tries to save him. It projects an image of vitality, of youth, of strength. It literally rewrites his physical appearance for a few moments to say, I am still relevant. I am still young. Look at me.
That is heartbreaking.
It is incredibly human. But the mechanism is what's terrifying to the rational mind. Seth is saying that intense emotion, panic, or desire can mold physical matter. The boss didn't know he was doing it. It wasn't a magic trick he practiced in the mirror. It was a raw psychic defense mechanism that spilled over into the physical world.
And before the skeptics out there say, oh, it was just a trick of the light or John was tired, Seth doubles down. He says John wasn't the only one who saw it.
This is the verification phase, and it is stunning. Seth describes 3 other people at that meeting who witnessed the transformation, whether they consciously admitted it or not, and he describes them physically.
Let's go through the witnesses. Witness number 1.
Seth describes a man with dark hair, somewhat in a circle, with some of the head bare. An Andy Gump with a paunch, a long nose and eyes with a twinkle, from a place with an Indian-sounding name.
Andy Gump. That's a deep cut. For those who don't know, that was a comic strip character from the early 20th century with a very distinct receding chin, basically no chin at all.
Right. So John hears this description and immediately identifies him. That's John Winslow.
Does Winslow fit?
Perfectly.
Yeah.
He has the circular hair pattern balding on top, the Andy Gump chin, the long nose. And where's he from?
Syracuse.
Syracuse. An Indian name.
Exactly. Seth nailed it. A man John barely thinks about. And Seth plucks him out of the memory of the meeting and says he saw it too.
Okay, witness number 2.
Seth says another younger man with a broad, almost Slavic face and short prickly hair, black or brown.
And John identifies him.
As Bob Deneen, another salesman present at the meeting. The physical description matches, except John notes Deneen's hair is graying now, but was dark.
And witness number 3. This one is really interesting because Seth describes his personality too.
Seth describes a man in his 50s, overweight, gray suit, an interest in history, holds an intermediate position, and he is known as a squawker.
A squawker, like a complainer, a loudmouth.
Someone who makes noise, someone who is always squawking about something. And John identifies this as Stan Farrer, the regional manager himself, the very guy who was causing the boss's panic. So the man causing the panic also witnessed the result of the panic.
Seth says Farr is in an intermediate position which fits a regional manager perfectly. And the gray suit matches too.
This is incredible. Seth is essentially remote viewing a past event in Rochester, identifying specific people by their facial features and personality quirks just to prove that the shape-shifting event was real.
He's validating John's perception. He's saying, you are not crazy. Reality is not stable. It is fluid.
What are the implications of this? If a middle manager in Rochester can de-age 15 years just because he's stressed out, what does that say about our bodies?
It says that our bodies are not fixed objects. They are projections of our consciousness. We think we are solid flesh and bone, but Seth is saying we are energy held in a pattern by our beliefs and our emotions. When the emotion changes drastically enough, like in a state of sheer panic, the pattern can shift.
It reminds me of those stories of mothers lifting cars off their babies. Hysterical strength. This is like hysterical beauty, hysterical youth.
Hysterical vitality, yes. The subconscious mind doesn't know the laws of physics. It only knows I need to survive or I need to be seen. And it manipulates the atoms to make that happen.
And Seth mentions the conscious mind can distort as well as the subconscious quite as easily.
He's reminding us that we're doing this all the time. Maybe not as dramatically as the boss in Rochester, but every day We are projecting our self-image. If you feel tired and beaten down, you look tired and beaten down. If you feel vibrant, you look vibrant. We usually think the physical state causes the feeling, like, I look tired, so I feel tired. Seth says no. You feel defeated, so your face rearranges itself to show defeat.
It's the ultimate fake it till you make it, but on a molecular level.
And it brings us back to the start of the deep dive. The white-haired man influencing John's politics. That's an invisible mental influence. The mother's shoes causing pain, that's an emotional influence. The boss shape-shifting, that's a subconscious survival influence.
The theme here is that the invisible creates the visible.
Precisely. We are walking through a world of results, but the causes are all hidden in the psyche. Seth is just pulling back the curtain and showing us the machinery.
It makes you wonder how many times we've seen something like this and just filtered it out, you know? You look at your friend and think, wow, they look different today, and you just shrug it off. But maybe they actually were different. Maybe they shifted.
Seth suggests that we subconsciously notice these things, like the three witnesses did, but our conscious mind edits them out because they don't fit our worldview. We say, oh, it must be the lighting. We rationalize it away. John Bradley, because of his training with the sessions, was open enough to actually see it and retain the memory.
It's a challenge to you, the listener, isn't it? To stop editing reality, to actually look at what's in front of you.
Pay attention to the anomalies, the glitches in the matrix. That's where the learning happens.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one last little detail. The gold star.
Yes. Seth's humor.
At the end of the session, Seth signs off. He's given all these accurate descriptions. He's diagnosed the health issues. He's explained the shape-shifting. And he says, my heartiest regards, and I will get my gold star, though you shall have trouble pinning it on me.
Because he doesn't have a chest to pin it on.
It's such a dad joke.
Yeah.
But it's charming. He's proud of his work. He knows he nailed the description of Murphy and the witnesses.
He does take pride in the accuracy. He wants to be taken seriously as a distinct intelligence. He's not just Jane's subconscious rambling. He is an entity delivering verifiable data. And in session 315, he certainly earned that star.
He really did. So let's quickly recap what we've learned today in this deep dive.
We learned that local politics is a minefield of hidden influencers, and you should always check if there's a white-haired man named Murphy pulling the strings.
We learned that if your left hand hurts, you might want to check your guilt levels, and that eggplant and green clothing are legitimate therapeutic tools.
We learned that sneakers can literally hurt your feet if they remind you of your mother's trauma.
And finally, we learned that reality is softer than we think. That a panicked boss can turn back the clock 15 years just to survive a meeting.
The takeaway for me is vigilance. Vigilance of your own thoughts, your own motivations, and the hidden currents around you. The world isn't what it seems on the surface. There are layers. And Seth helps us read those layers.
If this session has piqued your curiosity, and honestly, how could it not? You owe it to yourself to go to the source.
Absolutely. We are just scratching the surface here. These sessions are incredibly dense with insight. You should read the full sessions. Study the Seth material books.
You can find them at the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. That's sethcenter.com/the-early sessions. Go there, get the books, support the publishers who keep this amazing material alive.
It's a library of the human soul. Dig in.
And as you go about your week, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. If our intense personal emotions can literally alter our physical faces in a boardroom, what happens when millions of us feel panic at the exact same time? Is it possible that the decay or vibrancy of our very cities, our architecture, even our weather, is just a macro-level projection of our collective subconscious?
That is a fascinating, terrifying thought.
Keep your eyes open, and if your boss suddenly looks 20 years younger, maybe don't panic. Just remember, session 315, I think we earned our gold star today. Good night, listener.